So now that we have a transition when you're exiting the overworld and a transition when you're entering battle, we need to do the opposite. You need a transition when you're exiting battle and a transition when you're entering the overworld, and we'll use the same transitions. We're going to have to change a little bit of what we've put into place up to this point though to make it work. Namely, we're going to have to make a little bit of change to our battle flow. So if you go to your battle flow script, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to create a new state for whose turn. So right now there's hero, enemy, effects delay, and neither. So what we want to do is we don't want the enemy to get their turn if their HP has reached 0. So unless you're doing some kind of spoil sport type ability that a certain enemy has, that it gets to get a final attack in, but that's the exception, not the rule. So, first thing we really need to do is we're going to go over to our monster control script. We haven't gone here in a little while, and just change your enemy HP. I already went ahead and did it because it's just changing a value. I didn't add any new functionality, I simply changed the values that they are, and you can put them at whatever you want. I just put them to low numbers so as that the battles don't go on, because we're just trying to test the functionality of when the enemy dies. So what we're going to do is we're going to pop this in here. So in the flash delay in battle flow, what we're saying is if the enemy HP is less than or equal to 0, create this new state, end of battle. And then we have to add an else, because if we don't, it would change the end of battle and then immediately change the enemy, because the whole idea is we're trying to keep it from going into the enemy's turn. So as long as the enemy's HP is greater than 0, it'll still go into enemy turn like normal. It's only if it's not greater than 0 that it will go into this new state, end of battle. So now we have to check for that. So if whose turn is equal to end of battle, then what we're going to do is we're going to instantiate the transition. So to do that, we need to make the GM object aware of the transition, just as we made it aware of these other objects, these other prefabs. So, and we'll keep the naming the same, transition. Again, it's not a static variable, so you can use the same name multiple times. In this case, seeing the same name will make you realize that it's the same functionality. It's the transition. So since it's attached, the script is attached to the GM object, you now see there's the transition here. So just go to the prefabs, drag and drop the transition to that. Okay. So we have our transition object. We say if HP is less than 0 for the enemy, don't go to the enemy turn, instead of go to enemy end of battle. And in end of battle, we're just going to instantiate the transition object. Again, have to give it the 3 coordinates, X, Y, and Z. And we want to use the object's rotation. We haven't done much with it, but there are times where if you don't do that, you'll actually get the object rotated in the wrong direction. And now, so the GM object is aware of transition, checks to see if enemy HP is less than 0 or equal to 0. Instead of going to the enemy turn, it goes to end of battle, and in end of battle we go to instantiate. So we're instantiating the transition object. The transition object in turn is then controlled by zoom control out. So this is where the code is starting to get a little bit dicey, where to really create what seems like one function is actually multiple functions strung together, because you have the checking of the HP being set to 0, then you have the creation of a transition object, then you have the loading of the new level. So to do that, we're going to rewrite a little bit of what we have here. Because right now, this script, which is attached to the transition object, simply says that if this has been reached, then go ahead and load battle. Well, since we're repurposing this object, we need to give a few more conditions. So instead of just checking to see if it's reached that value, we also have to say if, and this is something new we haven't used, loaded level name. You can actually say, what level am I in? Very, very important function, very important ability is to be able to figure out what the name of the level you're in. So if we are in overworld, then load battle. So this is what was checking before. Now we're doing an additional check. We're saying, okay, if this value has been reached and the level we're currently in is the overworld, then go ahead and load battle. So that functionality is the same. We just had to put in an extra condition for it to make it be true. This is where we're adding new functionality. Now we're saying, okay, if we are in battle, then load overworld. Now this won't be 100%, because what happens is as soon as enemy HP reaches 0, the transition is triggered, and then when the transition reaches this value, then the overworld is loaded again. In other words, there's no pause that says, okay, you got a certain amount of XP, you got a certain amount of HP, or items rather, you got a certain amount of XP and items, a check to see if someone leveled up. So obviously there's a lot more functionality that would have to go in there, but right now we're just looking at the transition. And I forgot to do the double equal sign, because I almost always do. Let's try this now. Let's save our scene. Let's go to overworld. Transition in. There we go. So not quite there yet, because we need the transition. We got the transition out. Now we have to add the transition in. And to add that extra transition, we need to go to battle, and we're going to temporarily turn our 4 transition objects into prefabs. Grab one at a time. So tile top, bottom, left, and right. In this case, we're not deleting them because we don't want to get rid of them from here. We're just doing this as an easy way to transfer them from one to the other. So now we want to go to our overworld, and now they get added. Take a quick look at this, because it's being done at the beginning of a level, doesn't load a new level, so we shouldn't have to make any of the kind of changes that we did for the other transition. So that actually might be all that it takes. Now, it just occurred to me that in one of the other videos, I zoomed in with the camera on the battle scene. I never did that with this scene. So, like, if you come here to battle, you click on main camera, you can see this is at 3.843. So, just for consistency, you won't always want to do this, but in this case, for consistency, so we don't have to change our transitions, we're going to go ahead and make that consistent across all of our levels. So let's go to the overworld, go to the main camera, give it the same size, and now as you can see, the border of the camera stuff is no longer cut off. So if we go back to undo, you can see the camera border stuff would have been cut off. And so this should work. And now the character's bigger because we've zoomed in, grass is bigger too. There we go. So we have the transition from Outworld, the transition into battle, the transition out of battle, and the transition into the Outworld. And that's it. So as I said, it's not perfect because you still have to have really like an end of battle menu where you say how much XP and items were found and this check to see if there's any level up, that kind of thing. But since we're just focusing on the transition, that should suffice.